Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am GeneralLotz, and we're back for some more Doom 2016. And this is now the third time I have recorded this episode. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen. It's crashed at the same place twice. However, when I first recorded this, I had this set on Ultraviolence. It's on Hurt Me Plenty, and I'm just going to finish the game with that because I'm pissed off now. Because I had recorded this already. It was a long episode, and it crashed at the very end. Where it crashed, I played several times, and then in the second recording, it crashed almost immediately. So in this recording, I'm going to just stop the record there, make that its own episode, and then finish up the other half in another episode. Quite aggravating indeed. However, this level never really worked that well. When I had the GTX 760, this particular level always tanked the frame rate, and it's still kind of doing that. I don't know what it is about this particular part of this level, but it's seriously, the frame rate's going down, but not nearly as bad as with the GTX 760. With the GTX 760, I was able to run the game fairly well, but when I got to this point here, the frame rate tanked down to 20 frames per second. I have no idea why. It just did. And then when I got to this point here, when I jumped down here, the frame rate tanked to about 10 frames per second. And even then, it's still chugging. I don't know what it is about that room, but it chugs. I don't understand what it is about that part of the level. That the record breaks. I don't understand it. I just don't know. I know it's got to be the game, not the software, but still. See, as you can see, like, the frame rate tanks and everything. I don't understand what the problem is. Of course, you know what the worst part is? The episode, when I recorded it the first time, was great. There were all kinds of jokes, various stories. Now, in the third record, it's like, well, what did I say? I don't even remember. One of the things I was talking about at this juncture was the concept of gamer rage. You know, getting so annoyed or aggravated at a game, you want to, like, smash the controller or something like that. Now, I've never actually smashed a controller, although something similar happened where I took the game box. It was a game called Star Trek Legacy, which is a little spaceship kind of shooting game. And I took the game box, and I was going to throw it on my bed in anger, right? Well, that's not what happened. What happened was, I rolled a natural 20, and I flung it, and it hit the stand of the Enterprise A. For you see, above my bed, I had a Enterprise A on a stand. It was a model. It hit the stand, and literally cracked the neck of it, because there's a little neck that stuck to the ship. And then the Enterprise fell. And it was most aggravating indeed, but the level in Star Trek Legacy that caused such gamer rage was you're controlling the Stargazer, and you had to stop these asteroids from hitting planets. It's a very infamous level, one that not just me had trouble with. And if you don't stop the asteroids in time, all the planets die, and yeah. And there's a lot of asteroids. The ships only move so fast. And it's one of those where you got the checkpoints. And so what ends up happening is you gotta play it over and over again. The end. There's wow. There's another game. There's another game known as Battlefront 2, the real version. And in that particular game, there was another level that was most angering indeed. It was on Yavin 4 on the campaign. You had to take this hill, and even the Imperial officers like, it's going to be a tough slug. And yeah, it was. And then there was one more level that comes to mind right now as I play this game, and that level is, of course, well, not that level, that game is, of course, Simpsons Hit and Run, another S game. And Simpsons Hit and Run is a pretty good game. It's probably the best Simpsons game of all time, with the close second being the Simpsons arcade game. But in that game, at the very end, it's the last level too. You have to control this Jeep and you have to race against the clock to do something. I think it's like stop some aliens or something. I can't remember exactly what the plot was at the very end. In any event, it's one of those where the time limit is such that you cannot fuck up once. You can literally make no mistakes whatsoever. Which means if you fuck up once at the beginning of the level, you might as well just reload the save. And I did just that until I finally just said fuck it and gave it up. It's one of those games that I wouldn't finish until many years later. But it's just one of those things, though. It's like, goddamn. Gamer rage is always hilarious anyway. And no one knows they have gamer rage until they have it. You know, the idea, like, when you're trying to play a game you want to win, because you like the game, and it's like, nothing will stop you from playing that game. You know, no one will stop you from playing whatever it is. I remember there was a particularly annoying segment in, I think I might have said this, or maybe I didn't. It might have been in one of the records of this episode. If not, ignore it. In Bioshock Infinite. Yeah, I think I did say that in a different episode. Okay, never mind. Just remember the Bioshock Infinite story. Where that woodsman character, or whatever his name is, the severed head guy. That was an annoying one too, but for whatever reason, people do like to complain about the old Dark Souls, when Dark Souls has actually been the least annoying game. There's actually only one boss in Dark Souls that has ever really annoyed me to no end, other than Ornstein and Smo, and that of course was the what the hell that one was called, the Creeping Mass or something, the big red guy in the lava level, that guy, and that one, the only way to defeat that particular boss is you have to do an exploit where it like falls off a cliff. But once you know that, it's like it's pitifully easy. And if you're really good at parrying, the final boss of Dark Souls is extraordinarily easy as well. I never was able to get good at parrying, so I just threw a shitload of spells at him. And that killed him quite well. Killed him quite well indeed. Oh, come on, Pinky. Run! Do your Bane charge so I can blast you in the back and smack you with your own bloody small intestines. Fucking Pinky. Hate those things. Fucking shield guy. Hate those guys too. Just hate the whole game. Doom sucks. Except for the original one. Oh, but the other thing I was talking about was Star Trek. Specifically post-Nemesis content. Now, for a long time, Star Trek fans, Star Trek as the cultural consciousness would know it, ended in 2002. No, 2001. It ended in 2001, and I went in a big-ass circle there, with the release of Star Trek Nemesis. Now, Star Trek Nemesis, as I've already said, was absolutely horrifically terrible. And it was generally one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. Well, it was a very bad send-off for Star Trek. It really was. Star Trek, as we know it, really, is more the 24th century than it is the 23rd century. Yes, the original series was very influential, but a lot of the Star Trek canon comes from the 24th century series, and the 24th century ended in 2002. Once that ended, you know, Star Trek now is just, here's more 23rd century content that no one really wants. We already know what happened. We already know the end result of everything, because the 24th century has already happened. Instead of setting it, you know, in like the 25th century or the 29th century or something like that, it's all 23rd century, and none of it's any good. Yeah, the Trek movie, the new Treks aren't bad. I've said on many occasions how I enjoy them, but you know, you got Star Trek Discovery out of that, and Star Trek Discovery really isn't very good. It isn't very good because not because another 23rd century series would be bad, but the idea that the people behind the show wanted to sort of stick it to Trump supporters by having the Klingons basically be them. You know, whether or not the Klingons really act like that, and it's kind of debatable. the idea that that was the first thing on their mind, I think, is pretty terrible. Star Trek has always been about inclusion. Now it's about, well, we only include those who we think are great, you know. But the big problem is the overall reputation of Trek has been hurt by Star Trek Discovery and the very people behind it. You know, there was a particularly interesting live stream I saw, and there was a statement made that, you know, most of the Star Trek fans now are just rabid SJWs, but that really wasn't true, and I don't think it is true now. The thing about Star Trek is it sort of appealed to everyone. And what's interesting now, though, is you'll see people saying that Star Trek was always about the SJWing, but it really wasn't. And I think I think with the advent of the internet, you know, there is this belief now that, you know, Star Trek is pushing this message, this anti-religion, anti-capitalism message, but it really isn't. Star Trek didn't really do that. I think one of the episodes that people always mention is Who Watches the Watchers as being the anti-religion episode. The big problem is that episode really isn't anti-religion. I mean, you can get that message out of it if you want, but it really isn't an anti-religion episode. What it is it's a bunch of primitives start worshiping Captain Picard as a god, and Picard says that's terrible, that you shouldn't do that. He doesn't actually say that religion in and of itself is bad. He's saying that when taken to that extreme, it is. And, well, it is. You know, like, if you take religion to that extreme where you're willing to kill people for being, you know, apostates, if you're willing to sacrifice people on an altar to appease the Picard, well, that is bad. That is legitimately a bad thing. You can read the message that, oh, it's anti-religion, but it really isn't. You know, unless you follow a religion that requires you to sacrifice people on the altar of corn, then maybe that's your own problem. But you get the idea, you know. But then again, that's symbols for you. You know, that's... A symbol can mean whatever you want it to mean. Like take the America Fuck Yeah song. You know, that's not meant to be a particularly flattering song for the U.S., but if I wish to take it as such, you know, then I can. That's a symbol. And a symbol can mean whatever you want it to mean. And ultimately, Star Trek isn't quite what the internet makes it out to be. You know, it's kind of like calling Janeway a space terrorist. Is she really? What did she do? In some of the badly written episodes, possibly. But ultimately, you know, that's really not what the series is all about. And it's one of the things, though. But it could be that for you, if that's what you read out of it. But ultimately, that still did damage the reputation of Star Trek. Star Trek still has... Star Trek is interesting, though. I almost would say that it might need to just, not necessarily die off, but it needs... I don't know. I think it's reached the point where it really has... It does have maximum lack of ideas. Especially with the most recent Star Trek media. The whole idea behind... graphical flaw! Blow it up! Like, the whole idea that the Federation isn't the Federation. And then, and you know, like the concept of STD, where like everything you loved about Star Trek really isn't now. Enjoy. Aha, I got you! You fucking bastard. Come on, blow her up. Wonder if that's sexist. Probably. But then again, isn't everything these days? The thing about Star Trek is Star Trek was never meant to single out one group. Star Trek was meant to make you think. Star Trek was meant to say, what about this or what about that? Star Trek was supposed to be more than it is now, I'm afraid. The idea that we need to single out people who voted a certain way because we don't like them is not what Star Trek is supposed to be. And it's quite sad that that's what it has become. But then again, that's all my franchises have gone that way. And you can't even escape it in the books either. Because in the books, well, it turns out that the Federation isn't what you thought it was. The end, right? That really was quite aggravating. But then again, you know, you don't have to accept it as canon, and you can just read something else. But then again, if you want to read Star Trek, you're kind of screwed. Alright, there's somebody left alive somewhere. Unless, of course, close the will. Yeah. There's one guy left somewhere. Ah, there he is. Maybe there's two guys. Nope. Alright, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the game likes to crash. So what we're going to do is we're going to trigger this not cutscene, but the checkpoint. And we're going to take a break. And come back and hope that it works. So this is GeneralLotz wishing you good. Star Trek continues. Whatever makes you happy.